stuck overthinking? Alan Watts' mind-blowing insight ends it now. There's a voice in your head right now. Maybe it's been there all day. Maybe it's always been there. It's analyzing, calculating, predicting, or rehearsing, replaying. It's telling you what could go wrong, what already did, what you should have done differently. It's trying to solve problems even when there aren't any. And if you're like most of us, you've probably mistaken that voice for you. But what if it's not? What if that voice, that compulsive inner monologue, is just a tool that's gone out of control, a machine running loops of fear and doubt on autopilot? And what if the key to peace isn't in thinking more clearly, but in thinking less, or at least thinking differently? Alan Watts, the British philosopher who made Eastern wisdom accessible to the West, saw overthinking not as a personal failure, but as a cultural illness. He said, "A person who thinks all the time has nothing to think about except thoughts. So he loses touch with reality and lives in a world of illusions." That's a brutal truth, but it's also freeing, because it means you're not broken, you're just trapped in a habit. A habit of believing that thinking is the highest faculty we have. But Watts challenged that. He said thinking is like chopping wood, it's useful, even necessary. But if you never stop swinging the axe, eventually you'll destroy the forest you're trying to live in.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more topics you love.
So let's ask the core question: why do we overthink? What are we really trying to achieve? Most of the time, we're trying to control the future. We want guarantees. We want certainty. We want to rehearse every outcome so we'll be safe. But here's the paradox, and Watts pointed this out with piercing clarity: the more we try to control the future, the more we become anxious about it. The more we try to solve life like a math problem, the more life slips through our fingers. Because life isn't a problem, it's a process, a dance, a flow, and thinking is just one part of that flow, not its master. Watts said something that seems like a riddle, but it's actually a revelation. Muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone. And think about that. When your mind is agitated, spinning, trying to fix itself with more thinking, you're actually stirring the mud. You're making it worse. But if you leave it alone, if you step back, let go, and feel instead of analyze, the water clears on its own. This is not passivity. This is allowing clarity to emerge organically rather than forcing it artificially. It's the difference between staring at a puzzle and suddenly seeing the solution versus trying to force it by brute logic. Insight doesn't come from grinding harder. It comes from stillness. But stillness is terrifying to the ego. It's terrifying to the part of you that wants control. That part thrives on overthinking, because as long as you're thinking, you're not experiencing. You're not feeling. You're not being. And that's the real tragedy of overthinking. It disconnects us from life itself. We're at a party, but we're wondering if we said the wrong thing 5 minutes ago. We're watching the sunset, but we're planning our schedule for next week. We're lying in bed, exhausted, but our minds are trapped in imaginary arguments or worst-case scenarios. The moment is here, but we're not. Watts didn't advocate for banishing thought altogether. That's not Zen. That's not possible. Instead, he invited us to observe thought like a passing cloud. He said, "You are under no obligation to be the same person you were 5 minutes ago. That includes your thoughts. Just because a worry arises in your mind doesn't mean you have to follow it. Just because a memory surfaces doesn't mean you have to replay it. You can watch it, let it float by, return to now. That's the practice. And yes, it is a practice, not a switch you flip, but a habit you cultivate. So the next time you're spiraling in thought, ask yourself this: is this helpful, or is this just noise? Is this thought guiding me, or is it distracting me from what I already know? Because deep down, we often do know. We know what we want. We know what we feel. We know what needs to be done. It's the overthinking that clouds the signal. And the more we try to think our way out of overthinking, the deeper we sink into it. That's the trap. What Alan Watts offered was a way out, not by doing more, but by doing less. By noticing the thoughts, smiling at them like mischievous children, and returning to the breath, the body, the moment. Overthinking loses its power the moment you stop feeding it your attention. It's like a fire that dies when you stop throwing wood on it. And here's the kicker: when you stop overthinking, you don't become passive. You become precise. You act from intuition, not compulsion, then from presence, not panic. So I'll ask you this: when was the last time you truly experienced the present moment without commentary? And what would happen, what would truly happen, if you stopped trying to figure it all out and just let it be? Awakening from the machine, why you are not your thoughts, and never were. Most of us live as if our thoughts are the absolute truth. We believe every anxiety, every doubt, every judgment that appears in our mind. We mistake the voice in our head for our identity. But Alan Watts made a radical observation, one that flips everything you think you know about yourself upside down. You are not your thoughts. You never were. And the moment you realize this, not just intellectually, but viscerally, you begin to wake up from the machine. Think about it. Thoughts arise spontaneously. You don't choose them. You don't sit down and say, "Today, I will think 100 anxious thoughts about things I can't control." No, they just appear, uninvited, uncontrollable. But because they sound like you assume they are you. This is the root of our suffering. We've become possessed not by demons or spirits, but by language, by internal narratives that loop endlessly, convincing us that we are broken, behind, not enough, in danger, or somehow fundamentally flawed. Watts said this is one of the greatest illusions of modern life, the confusion of the thinker with the thought. The mind is like a radio. It broadcasts signals constantly. Some are useful, some are noise. But you are not the radio. You are the awareness listening to it. The signal may be static, it may be clear, but it may be chaotic. But the awareness, the silent witness, is always untouched, always still, always free. And that's what Watts invites us to discover, the gap between thought and awareness. The moment you see that gap, you're no longer trapped in the program. You can observe the mind without being swallowed by it. But here's the twist: this realization is not something you can think your way into. That's the trap of overthinkers. We try to understand how to stop overthinking. We try to conceptualize not being our thoughts. But it's like trying to taste honey by reading about it. Real freedom comes from experience, not analysis. And that experience begins when you stop participating in every thought that arises. Let them come. Let them go. Watch them like birds flying across the sky of your awareness. Some are loud, some are beautiful, some are terrifying, but none of them are you. Alan Watts used to say, trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth. The moment you try to pin down who you are, you reduce yourself to a concept. And you are not a concept. You are not a role. You are not a history. You are the living, breathing awareness behind it all. So when a thought says, "I'm not good enough," that's not you speaking. That's a mental echo, an old recording, a cultural imprint, a fear-based loop. And you don't have to believe it. You can hear it and smile, like watching a storm pass through without needing to stop the rain. But we don't like this idea because it challenges the ego. The ego wants to be the thinker. It wants to feel in control. It wants to believe that it can solve life by thinking harder. But the ego is just another thought, another construct inside the machine. And the more you identify with it, the more you suffer. Watts wasn't trying to destroy the ego, he was trying to liberate us from being ruled by it. He wanted us to see that the ego is like a mask we wear in the theater of life, useful for playing roles, but not who we really are. So ask yourself, who are you when the thoughts stop? Who are you in the silent space between one thought and the next? That space, that stillness, is your true self, not the inner monologue, not the story, the awareness. And it's from that awareness that true peace emerges. Not because all your problems disappear, but because you're no longer lost in the noise of your own mind. You witness the chaos, but you are not the chaos. This is the awakening Watts spoke of, not a mystical escape from reality, but a radical return to it. To see clearly, to hear the voice without becoming it, and to use the mind like a tool, not be used by it like a prisoner. You are not the machine. You are the one who sees it. The dance of life, how letting go of control ends overthinking forever. We tend to believe that the more we control, the safer we'll be. That if we can just think through every scenario, anticipate every risk, and manage every variable, we'll finally feel peace. But Alan Watts tells us something radically different, something that sounds almost blasphemous in a world obsessed with control. The more you try to control life, the more it controls you. And the more you try to control your thoughts, the more they control you. Overthinking is not a sign of intelligence, it's a symptom of fear. And that fear always comes from one core illusion, the belief that life is a problem to be solved rather than a mystery to be lived. Watts compares life not to a puzzle, but to a dance. And in a dance, you don't aim to reach a particular spot on the floor. You don't race the music, you move with it. You flow, you feel, you respond, not with a plan, but with presence. That's the secret most of us miss. Overthinking happens when we try to choreograph a dance that was never meant to be scripted. We want guarantees before we move. We want certainty before we act. But life doesn't work like that. Life rewards movement. Life rewards surrender. That surrender is not passivity. It's the opposite. It's active trust. It's the courage to live without knowing, to show up in each moment fully, even when you have no idea what comes next. And here's the wild part. When you let go of control, you actually begin to act with more clarity, not less. You stop reacting from fear, and you start responding from intuition. You stop looping in repetitive thoughts, and you start tuning into real-time wisdom. It's like the difference between trying to swim by thrashing around and floating. Trust becomes your buoyancy. Watts believed this shift wasn't just psychological, it was spiritual. Because when you let go of control, you're not just stepping back from your thoughts. You're stepping back from the illusion that you are the one running the show. You start to feel life moving through you, your breath, your words, your choices. They arise not from some tight place of panic, but from something deeper, something freer. Call it presence. Call it the Tao, call it the self. But you know it when you feel it. It's the moment you stop trying to grasp life and instead allow life to touch you. But this isn't easy, because control feels safe. It gives us the illusion of certainty, and letting go feels like death. The death of the ego, the death of the fixer, the planner, the perfectionist. And maybe it is. Maybe you have to let a part of you die, the part that needs to know everything before you begin. The part that confuses thinking with being. The part that would rather be stuck in a loop than risk making a mistake. But what if making a mistake is sacred? What if falling out of step in the dance is part of the dance? What if the things you fear the most, uncertainty, vulnerability, failure, are actually portals to your deepest freedom? What's often said, to have faith is to trust yourself to the water. When you swim, you don't grab hold of the water, because if you do, you will sink and drown. Instead, you relax and float. That's it. That's the image. Floating, trusting, letting go, not because everything is figured out, but because you no longer need it to be. You discover that peace doesn't come from controlling the current, it comes from moving with it. And that's when overthinking dies, not with a bang, but with a breath. With a soft exhale that says, I don't need to figure it all out right now. I just need to be here. And suddenly the mind quiets. Not because you forced it to, but because it no longer needs to scream for attention. You've returned to the rhythm, the flow, and the dance. And in that space, you don't think your way through life. You live it. The final shift, how to live without overthinking and never go back. At some point, we stop asking, how do I stop overthinking? And begin asking something far deeper. What kind of life unfolds when I no longer need to think my way through it? That's the final shift. It's not about silencing the mind once or twice. It's about no longer being owned by it. Alan Watts didn't offer quick fixes. He offered something far more powerful, a complete reorientation of how we relate to thought, self, and reality. And once you truly see the illusion of overthinking, you can't unsee it. You begin to live in a different way. Not perfectly, but consciously. This shift is not dramatic. It's subtle. It happens in small moments when you catch your mind spiraling and, instead of diving in, you pause. You step back. You breathe, you feel. You remember that thoughts are clouds, not commands. You remember that clarity comes not from more noise, but from less interference. And that presence is not something you achieve, it's what's left when the clutter falls away. Watts often emphasized that we don't need to make the mind quiet. That just adds another layer of struggle. We simply need to stop feeding it with our resistance. Overthinking thrives on resistance. It feeds on the belief that you must control, fix, and solve. But when you drop the fight, when you stop trying to fix what was never broken, the mind settles on its own. Like a snow globe returning to stillness once you stop shaking it. So, how do you live this, not just understand it? You begin by noticing. Noticing when you leave the present moment and get lost in thought. Noticing the tightness in your body when you overanalyze. Noticing the way certain thoughts feel heavy, repetitive, obsessive. And then you return to the breath, to the sound of the world around you, to the sensation of being alive. This is the practice, not escaping thought, but returning to awareness again and again until it becomes your home. And here's the beautiful truth. The more you practice this, the less enticing overthinking becomes. You begin to see how much energy it drains, how little it solves. You realize that most of your best decisions, ideas, and insights came not from overthinking but from non-thinking, but from stillness, from intuition, from being in flow. And that's when the final shift happens. You don't just stop overthinking, you stop identifying with the one who overthinks. You see that overthinker was never who you really were, but it was just a role you played, a habit, a mask. Now, you are someone else entirely. You are not the mind. You are the space in which the mind arises, the watcher, the presence, the awareness. And from this space, life becomes lighter, not because everything is perfect, but because you no longer need it to be. So here's the final question. Who are you when you stop believing your thoughts? Not just for a moment, but for good. Who might you become if you lived from presence, not panic, and from trust, not tension? That's not just the end of overthinking. That's the beginning of freedom.